We have made it to the final portion of the offseason here in the Portland Trailblazers MyNBA franchise series here at NBA 2K24. Today we'll be going through everything involving free agency, making our final decisions for what our roster is going to look like going into season number 3. Last episode, of course, was the NBA draft. I will leave a card at the top right of your screen in case you missed that episode because it ended up being pretty wild. In terms of player movement around the league, you're not going to find a more exciting draft, largely because of some of the teams we had at the top of the lottery. Contenders like the Heat, Spurs, Pelicans, and Rockets all initially finished with picks in the top 5, and all of those teams were looking to go out and make big moves, and a couple of them did. The Spurs acquired Domantas Sabonis for the 2nd pick. The Rockets got DeJounte Murray in a package with the 5th pick. The Lakers even made some moves. They got Drew Holiday and Jeremy Grant. The Bulls, meanwhile, who originally had pick 3, traded down to acquire picks 8 and 9 from Toronto. Other teams like Miami and New Orleans decided to keep their picks, at least for now. Michigan State guard Myron Sheridan ended up going with the number 1 pick, with the top 4 prospects going in the top 4, as we expected: Hopkins, Yakovlev, and Battle. As for the Trailblazers, we went into the day with 5 picks, 3 in the back half of the first round and 2 in the second round. Now, realistically, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for us to add 5 rookies. Rosters are only so big. So we made some moves. We traded away some players. Jeremy Grant went to the Lakers and Nasir Little went to the Jazz in a 3-team deal to help us move up to the 10th pick. And we also acquired a veteran of our own in a separate deal, Isaiah Stewart from the Detroit Pistons. He's a talented 6'8" big man who's going to be our enforcer. This is somebody down low who's going to give us tough physical minutes. He can shoot the 3-ball, and I think a change of scenery was in his best interest as he was kind of fizzled out of the Pistons rotation. So the biggest move we made was the 3-team deal with the Jazz and the Lakers to acquire the 10th pick, in which we selected Tennessee guard Khalil Griffin. In terms of projection, there were more obvious selections there at the time, such as Emel Wright, Esteban Del Real, Kalen Edwards, and Mikhail Yakovlev, but ultimately I felt that Griffin was the best fit for our roster. We're trying to build a clear identity of tough, physical players who are versatile. In Griffin's case, he can shoot the 3-ball, he can drive to the basket, he's a good finisher, he's a solid playmaker, and I love what he brings defensively. He is locked down on the perimeter. I think he's eventually got the versatility to guard multiple positions, and he's a great rebounder as well. Rebounding is a big emphasis of what we've tried to build with. Springer in the first round last year, obviously he's a great rebounder. Griffin now this year as well. So going into our 2nd pick, I kind of anticipated we would get a big like Prada Pilares. He ended up going earlier than I expected. However, that meant other players like Dante Branch slipped farther than I had anticipated, and we capitalized. Branch is another tough physical player who I think is going to be really good for us on the wing, and I think we got a steal with him. I think we also got a steal with Zay Logan out of Alabama State at the top of the 2nd round. We moved up a little bit in round 2 to ensure that we would get him because I really believe in his upside. I don't think he should have fallen to the 2nd round. I think these 3 rookies all have very high ceilings, and I think they all have an opportunity to contribute right away, along with the recently acquired Isaiah Stewart. With us adding those 4 players, I think our roster's in a pretty good spot, but we need to add some vets. We need to have some guys who have been around the block, been there, done that. Let's start with team and player options. We have 8 players eligible for team options, and we are going to accept 7 of them. The only player who we will decline is DeAnthony Melton. It's nothing against him. I think he's a pretty good player, but with the additions of Khalil Griffin and Dante Branch, we really don't need him, especially for a $12 million price tag. So he'll hit the open market, while everybody else, the obvious guys like Sharp, Henderson, and Abaji, obviously they are back, along with some of these younger guys down here who we hope maybe will give us bigger minutes this upcoming season. There's a lot of big-name free agents here, pretty much all of whom have player options, and pretty much all of whom declined, as we expected. Tatum, Giannis, Butler, Donovan Mitchell, Kyrie Irving, and Jalen Brunson headline the class of 2025 unrestricted free agency. This free agency should be a circus with 3 or 4 guys at least who you believe can be number 1 options for a championship caliber roster. We have one player on a qualifying offer, namely is Keita. We are not going to give that to him. And we have one other player who is going to be entering free agency, not counting Melton, and that's Ben Simmons. He's been our backup center for the last few years. He will hit the open market. His big contract is up. Maybe we look to bring him back. Maybe we don't. I think he's given us some solid minutes, but I wouldn't mind adding more of a traditional backup 5. We're in a good spot cap-wise. We have some big contracts like DeAndre Ayton and Anthony Simons, but we do have some flexibility. We don't have the money to go out and get like a Jason Tatum or a Giannis. Not that those guys would be very interested in coming here anyway. The oldest player on our roster is 26 years old with Simons and Ayton. So spoiler alert, we're going to be looking to add some older guys. A team of just young players does not work in the NBA. You need vets. And that's what we're going to be looking for here in free agency. Obviously, these big-name stars are tempting, but again, that's not realistically what we are currently searching for. These restricted players look good too. Mobley, Cade, Jalen Green, but I would expect those teams to match any contract offer that goes their way. So in terms of what we really need along with veteran presence, I think we're going to need another point guard, somebody who can be the secondary playmaker behind Scoot Henderson. And then we need more size. Isaiah Stewart's a really good starting point, but I don't think that's enough. Once DeAndre Ayton got hurt last year prior to the playoffs, our lack of size was apparent. We had Ben Simmons starting at center, for Christ's sake. As we look at the possible centers here, there are some good choices like Naz Reid or Kevon Looney. I would prefer more of a traditional like 7-footer though. Isaiah Stewart is already undersized at 6'8". So I think Mo Bamba kind of fits the prototype of what we're looking for. My one issue with him is he's not necessarily like a vet. Yeah, he's 27. He's been in the league 5 years. But I don't know if Mo Bamba being the oldest player on the roster is ideal. Nonetheless, we're going to offer him a 1-year contract for around $7.5 million. I think Marvin Bagley III is kind of in the same reign as Bamba. He's a talented player, former high draft pick who I think could give us good depth minutes. But is he like a vet? The last guy we're going to offer is Kevon Looney. I wish he was 2 or 3 inches taller, but other than his height, he fits exactly what I'm looking for. He has spent the last 10 years with the Golden State Warriors. He's a pro's pro, and I think he's the perfect guy to help lead this locker room going forward. Even if as a player, he doesn't fit the prototype of what I'm looking for compared to Bamba and Bagley. All 3 players except we can afford 2 of them. I only really want one of them, though, and I'm going to pick Kevon Looney. Yes, I'd rather a 7-footer, but with Looney's championship experience, I think that's going to be more valuable. Now I want to add a backup point guard. I want somebody who is a really good playmaker. Guys like Cole Anthony and Bones Highland are good players, but they're more score-first guys. I think Dennis Schroeder would be a great addition. He's been in the league a while, entering his 13th season, and he's decent at everything. He's a solid enough scorer, solid enough defender, pretty good passer. I think he'd be a perfect fit for what I'm looking for as the backup point guard behind Scoot Henderson. Hey, there's a pedophile. So that's pretty much all we're going to do here for free agency. Both guys, Looney and Schroeder, end up accepting. That's really all I wanted to do here for us in free agency. I wanted to add a big and I wanted to add a guard. And we did exactly that, getting 2 really solid vets with Kevon Looney and Dennis Schroeder. After simulating through the final day of moratorium, both players are now officially on the roster for good. And I think for the most part, we have rounded out our roster, but we got to see what's happened around the rest of the NBA. In terms of the max level players at the top of free agency, Tatum, Butler, and Brunson have already signed their deals. Giannis and Donovan Mitchell both agreed to deals in the moratorium, but they backed out. Giannis signed with an unspecified team, while Mitchell originally agreed to a deal with the Warriors, which no longer is through. Kyrie Irving, meanwhile, hasn't gotten a ton of attention from teams other than Dallas. So now I'm going to simulate right to the end of free agency because there's nothing else that's super paramount. There's a lot of good players still in here, specifically some of the young guys like Jalen Green, Josh Giddey, Hide Your Kids, Franz Wagner, and others. I would expect some of these really good young players like Green and Wagner to sign extensions with their current teams, but some of the other veterans in here like Lauri Markkanen, I think they're going to wait to sign towards the beginning of the year, which we'll go over those at the end of the episode. Let's talk about where the top 6, the max level guys, all went. We'll start with Jimmy Butler. He re-signs in Miami, only for 2 years though. Quite a few of these guys ended up signing shorter deals, including Jimmy Butler, who unsurprisingly returns to Miami with Damian Lillard and the number 1 draft pick, Myron Sheridan. Jalen Brunson also, by the way, re-signed with the New York Knicks. Butler and Brunson were the two most obvious ones. There was no way they were leaving their teams. I think everybody else was a little bit in doubt, including Jason Tatum. He does return to the Boston Celtics on a 5-year supermax. I thought maybe there was a chance he would find a new home like last year in the Knicks series when he signed with the Knicks. But here he is going to stick with Boston, who added Andrew Wiggins in the offseason via trade from the Warriors. Kyrie Irving, I always figured would re-sign in Dallas because they have a pretty good situation here. They were the 3 seed last year. But Kyrie's a wild card. You never really know. And with Luka Doncic nearing the end of his deal, I wasn't entirely sure what he would do. But he is back in Dallas, only for 1 year though. So Kyrie will get to hit the market with Luka, assuming he declines his player option. The most 2 interesting players here were Giannis and Mitchell. Giannis Antetokounmpo re-signs with the Spurs for 1 year and a significant discount. He takes around $15 million less than he could have in order for the Spurs to better their roster, which they haven't really done yet. And yet there is the key word. Everyone who we've gone over, at least amongst the superstars, has stayed on their current teams though. Not Donovan Mitchell. He has signed a big contract with the Golden State Warriors. As I mentioned earlier, he agreed to a deal with the Warriors, backed out of it because the Cleveland Cavaliers sent a late offer, but Donovan Mitchell has decided to sign with Golden State. The Warriors have lost a lot of their core recently. Draymond Green was traded away last year. Klay Thompson just retired. It really feels like the Warriors have begun to unravel. This is the beginning of the end, and they needed to make a big move, and this is the perfect addition. Mitchell and Steph Curry in the backcourt is going to be electric. The Cavaliers obviously won a title last year with Donovan Mitchell, but I think more so than anything, he really wanted to be in a big market, ideally New York. The Knicks were focused on Brunson, though, so he's going to head out to California and join Steph Curry with the Warriors. So of the top 6 guys, only one of them, Donovan Mitchell, finds a new home. But guys like Kyrie, Giannis, and Jimmy Butler all signed short-term deals to put themselves back onto the open market down the line. We talked about some of these guys in here. These guys are all going to be able to find new homes pretty soon. But what about the players who have signed since the start of free agency, who maybe aren't necessarily your superstars? The biggest mover was Brandon Ingram. He signs with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and this one's fascinating for multiple reasons. The Thunder have got themselves a squad now. I would presume that maybe Josh Giddey ends up elsewhere now, and the Pelicans take a big hit, although their future still looks very bright. James Harden signs with Toronto. The Raptors wanted to add a lead guard to join their versatile forwards, Scotty Barnes and Rurik Yakovlev, and they get their guy for 2 years. Other notable movers include Clint Capella to the Sacramento Kings, James Wiseman to the Bucks, DeAnthony Melton returns to the Sixers, Jalen Suggs signs a huge deal with the Wizards, Marvin Bagley goes back to the Kings, that's ironic. Ben Simmons signs with the Rockets. There are some obscenely big contracts in there, like Davion Mitchell, for example, got like $90 million over 3 years. I decided to edit some of the really bad ones, like Davion Mitchell, for example, should be getting maybe half of that. Let's move into player progression now. This should be fun with a young team. We should see a lot of green. And that would definitely end up being the case. We've got some big movers going up in a positive direction. Shaedon Sharpe is a 90 overall. Could we be looking at an all-star season for Sharpe? Some big additions here. He's now an A- playmaker. That's what I'm most excited about. If he doesn't average more than 2 assists a game this year, though, we're going to be making fun of him. Scoot Henderson's an 87. That's a big jump. Maybe he looks like an all-star too. Anthony Simons is an 86. People have wanted us to potentially move him, but he's still improving. He's still a big piece of our future. Ochai Agbaji with a big +4. He's now an 82 overall. Those top 4 guys all with big boosts in their IQ. Darius Springer goes up 3. He is an 80. His shooting looks a lot better. His inside defense goes up a lot. That's a big deal because he's going to be playing a lot of the 4 this year. Our rookies don't go up, obviously. Our new free agent signings didn't change at all. I thought maybe one of them, Schroeder in particular, would go down. So I'm very happy that they both stayed where they are. Next up, we've got NBA Summer League. an opportunity to see the young guys and what they can do. This is what the rotation's going to look like. We brought back some familiar faces, such as Keon Johnson, to play on the Summer League team. But obviously, I'm most intrigued to see the three rookies, Griffin, Branch, Logan. I'm also very intrigued to see Fritz Bengaro, last year's second rounder, who didn't really play. We ended up going 1-2. Here's the box score for the first game. Of the four focus players, the three rookies and Bengaro, they shot the ball horribly. A combined total of 7 for 32. Not ideal. Dante Branch was a lot better in the second game with 32 points. Griffin was also a lot better. Springer really struggled, though. And then the last game, we lost. Springer played well. Branch shot 2 for 13. Griffin shot the ball poorly again. Our rookies didn't do too well, minus the one big game from Dante Branch. Here's a look at the stats for Summer League. Keon Johnson was arguably our best player. Dante Branch put up good numbers. He was the most efficient of our three rookies, which doesn't say much. None of them were efficient. Darius Springer was pretty solid. I wish he took on more of a bigger role scoring. We won our first playoff game against Utah by nearly 30. Zay Logan leads the way in scoring. Griffin with a double-double. Branch played well. Springer inefficient, but he had 8, 6, and 5, filling up the stat sheet. We would lose our second game against the Clippers, so it is now over. Kalen Edwards, who we nearly drafted, had a solid game. Dante Branch and Zay Logan both played really well again. Springer was solid. Khalil Griffin, not so much. Not a great summer league for the top pick, Khalil Griffin. The Nuggets, led by Colin Gillespie and Lester Quinones, win the Summer League championship over the Clippers, who beat us in the second round. And here's a final look at the stats through the 5 games, with Dante Branch being the best player statistically. Branch had some really good games. He also had some really bad ones. All 3 of the rookies were very inconsistent at best. The All-Star City this year is going to be Boston. That's surely going to go really well. I can't quite think of the reason how that could go poorly. As for the draft class, as you guys know, the class is currently under construction. If you at home would like to make a player for the upcoming draft class, you should join the Discord server. Link is in the description, where you will be able to make a custom player who may be entered into the class. With that, we can now enter the season or not. We have 16 players on the roster. We've got to send it down to 15. We're going to trade away Chris Murray. He's 25 years old. It hasn't really worked out. He did play better last year, albeit in a very limited opportunity. We're going to send him to the Suns for Toumani Camara, Blazer legend, and a 2028 second rounder. We're going to open up the roster spot by releasing Camara and potentially signing him or somebody else to a two-way deal. So with that, we are now into Season 3. Boston is our first game of the year. Our home opener is a few days later against Atlanta. Before we wrap up the episode, though, I want to go over some of the moves that happened later in the offseason. As you guys saw in free agency, there were a lot of notable players still in there, and I want to go over some of the big ones who ended up signing to new teams late within the process. The biggest mover was definitely well-known child respecter Josh Giddey. For those of you living in the Chicago area, I would hide your children because Josh Giddey is coming. Hopefully not inside them. He signs a big 4-year deal with the Bulls. He's going to be the face of their rebuild. Chicago has completely torn it down. They've added quite a few rookies. And now they add Josh Giddey, who should be able to give them some passing and ball handling. Again, hopefully not around the kids. Fred VanVleet signs with the Magic. I'm a little perplexed by that because they've used high draft picks on other lead guards like Anthony Black and Tyson Ledbetter. Maybe one of those guys, Ledbetter in particular, I could see on the move. Jonathan Kuminga signs with Atlanta. This might be a last-ditch effort to hope that Trae Young sticks around because it feels like his time in Atlanta might be running out. Lauri Markkanen signs a big 3-year deal with the Pacers, and I think this could go down as one of the best moves of the offseason. I think Indiana's done a really poor job of building their roster since the start of this series. In Season 1, they traded for OG Anunoby just to let him go the following season. Last year, they traded Miles Turner for Jonathan Kuminga just to let him go. But with the extra money, they signed Markkanen, who's going to be a great piece with Tyrese Halliburton. Chris Middleton will hopefully replace Brandon Ingram with the Pelicans. Malik Monk will look to replace Donovan Mitchell in Cleveland. Trey Murphy to the Hornets. Saddiq Bey to the Knicks. Devin Vassell to the Orlando Magic. And that's about it for the notable ones. And there were some other guys in there, the Tobias Harrises of the world, along with some other solid veterans. There won't be any additional trades today because there aren't really any teams looking to trade their stars immediately, but there are some teams to look out for as we make it through the season and get closer to the trade deadline. With a big free agent class coming up, I think we could see some fireworks. The Orlando Magic, I think, are ready to take that next step. I think they could be looking to add a star. The Spurs want to please Giannis. I think they're going to look to add somebody. And the Oklahoma City Thunder certainly had the assets to add another piece with Shea and all of them. As for the sellers, the Phoenix Suns have been disappointing. I think they could look to move on from some guys. And then Atlanta as well. Trae Young, I could see him wanting out too. I think pretty much everybody with an important free agent could be a buyer or a seller. Luka and Kyrie with the Mavs, Giannis with the Spurs, Embiid with the Sixers, Durant with the Suns, and Curry with the Warriors. I'm very confident Curry sticks around because A, he's not going to retire anywhere else, and they just added Donovan Mitchell. But all those other guys, Durant with Phoenix, Embiid with the Sixers, Giannis with the Spurs, and Luka and Kyrie with the Mavs, I think those are the four teams to really monitor. If their seasons are going well, maybe they look to make a big move at the deadline to improve the roster. If their seasons aren't going well, maybe they look to flip their stars and get some assets before they walk in free agency. So that'll wrap up today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought of our offseason down below in the comments. Next episode, we will be kicking off season number 3. We will reveal the opening night rotation. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.